Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Subnet Show. I am your host, Gabriel Cardona, and I am incredibly stoked to be here. As always, we have an absolutely amazing episode today with some very special guests. But before we introduce them, let me introduce my amazing co-host, the man with the most cats in crypto, Connor Daly. What is up, my friend?
I'm so excited for today's episode. I feel like we've been on a roll this year. I think 2022, we've had a lot of bangers, and we've really seen the audience to respond to a lot of the content we've been making. But I am especially excited for today's episode. I think we're going to get into some really good topics. So without further ado, why don't you tell us who we have with us?
Sure. So, brief intro before I drop the name. So, one of the things I've said multiple times, and I genuinely believe this, is that Avalanche, the consensus, and Avalanche, the network, really represent a coming of age moment for the blockchain, in the same way that the Web 2.0 movement represented a coming of age moment for the web. So, the web launched in the mid 90s. People who were academics and computer science and professionals, hackers, these people understood that the web was going to have a profound impact on the world. And of course, a bunch of money rushed into the web, and we had the dot-com era. People started playing around with the web. They realized the technology was not yet mature, and the bubble popped. But people who stayed true to the vision continued working. And around 2004, 2005, we had the Web 2.0 movement, which was really around AJAX, asynchronous JavaScript, and XML. We had the beginning of the CSS and modern HTML and modern JavaScript. And from Web 2.0, we really got most of the modern companies that we see today really emerged from that moment. And I've been saying that Avalanche consensus represents a coming of age moment in the same way that now the blockchain is able to fulfill all of this promise that we've known about for so long, but the technology was just not quite there. And so in the same way that the web continues to become more and more ubiquitous every single day and continues to creep into different aspects of our lives, one of the places that we've been hearing about blockchain having a huge impact for years is in the space of gaming, but it just has not yet matured. But now with Avalanche consensus and this coming of age moment for the blockchain, we're starting to see huge leaps and bounds in the gaming space. And so today we are incredibly fortunate to have two amazing people with us. First, we have Don Norbury, who is the studio head at Shrapnel. Hello, Don. How are you doing?
Good, thanks, Gabriel.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time. And next we have Ed Chang, and Ed is the Director of Business Development with a focus on gaming at Avalanche. So thank you for joining us, Ed.
Yeah, it's great to be here and great to meet two of my coworkers for the first time as well.
It's true. This is the first time we're meeting. We're going to hang out next week in Barcelona, which is going to be super amazing. So the reason we brought on Don today is because Shrapnel is the world's first blockchain-enabled moddable AAA first-person shooter game, and they have chosen Avalanche as the network to underpin this entirely new gaming experience. And so we figured it would be good to have Don on and also to have Ed on, since Ed is leading so much BD stuff around gaming at Ava Labs. So I think first, we can just kind of approach this at a super high level. What are you guys currently working on with Shrapnel? And then how and why did you end up landing on Avalanche?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the road to Avalanche was a long one. We started working on Shrapnel about a year ago. And that's from a concepting and design perspective and the biz dev perspective as well. So really we're kind of in the early stages of development at this point. And that's, things like taking concepts and turning them into the environments that you want, making sure the gunplay and the traversal through the environments and the actual sessions feel good. That stuff that you have to do and get your hands on and just take time and iterate to make sure that it's where it needs to be from a games perspective. The road to Avalanche was, when we first came up with the inception for Shrapnel, something we wanted to do for a long time was not just have a extraction game that is kind of what we consider the next evolution. Good examples like Escape from Tarkov or the Dark Zone from the Division are they're kind of the early examples. And I would say Escape from Tarkov in particular can be a little player hating. And so we always look at that and try and figure out how we can shave rough edges off, what a version of that would be like in our own universe, and with kind of the style of gameplay that we actually want to achieve. So that it always existed for a while for us, as well as we had recognized these communities, and the early versions of these communities were us, which were people like modding back in like the 90s and early 2000s for games. And the version of that nowadays is people playing Minecraft, aging into Roblox, aging into Fortnite, some into PUBG, well, a lot into PUBG, and not really having, when they get into that space, a place to express themselves and be creators for the community. So we had always had that idea, and then about a year ago, just the kind of blockchain part snapped internally for us, in terms of the expression of ownership and transportability, and really like we started deep diving into that, and glued it together. And there's a long road from that inception to deciding what technology you're going to be on, and we knew, having been as part of the community, that there's a lot of, let's call it, user experience friction in the space, and that just does not fly in AAA gaming world, right? If it takes somebody more than 10 seconds to get in and have fun, they're going to churn out and they're just going to disappear, and that's death basically for a game. So a lot of the approach we took was trying to balance a lot of the numbers of intrinsic decentralized power that we see, like what we loved about the expression, and also be responsible in terms of what it might mean for the user experience of somebody who doesn't know anything about crypto, needs to be in like compliance if they get to that point, like all of these different user experiences that are kind of a nightmare, and there's not really like a good unified solution to all of that. And that, that's not the flashy, exciting part of creating a big like AAA enterprise, but it's a really, really important part about actually delivering what we want. So we went through talks and partnerships with like everybody over the course of a year. And thankfully, we were taking our time and kind of getting to the point where Avalanche came on our radar, and it, especially with the kind of like nascent subnet release, met a lot of like kind of put all the pieces together. We're like, we need a scalability, we need an intrinsic way to have like customizability and compliance, and that was the kicker for us that made in the end the decision kind of a no-brainer.
So Ed, can you take us through your side of that transaction? How did Shrapnel just show up on your radar, and what has the business process been like when you're approached by games who are interested in launching on Avalanche?
Yeah, it's funny because I actually had heard about Shrapnel before I even joined. I was out kind of interviewing and talking to a few folks, and Joe Ferrer is on the BD team. He was telling me like I was interviewing with him, and he was like, "Yeah, I got to hop off this call. I'm gonna go talk to this first-person shooter that's super exciting." That's like the first I had heard of it. And shortly after I had joined, I'd gotten put in touch with Calvin and Marcus, who are on kind of the BD team at Shrapnel, and just really impressed with the team throughout. If you know anything or have done the research on Shrapnel, like they've got a ton of kind of AAA entertainment video game dev experience. They've got some really smart minds who really get crypto. And so normally, you hear about a launch date of a year, 2 years from now, it feels way too long. And you're just like, yeah, let's move on to the next thing. But with these guys, like you really feel like they're onto something really big here. So I think just the grand vision, how they're going to execute all these things, I really enjoyed like listening to, and we knew we wanted to land them. And so we're lucky that the team themselves, like we're thinking about it from the tech piece first. And, I think when we talk to games who are looking to build, that's what I always tell them. I say, first of all, you should go talk to games who are built on Avalanche, maybe other protocols, just to get a feel for that experience. But also like, I want to sit down with our team and our tech teams and our product teams to help you figure out kind of where you're going, if we can meet those needs, right? Everything else kind of comes after that. And so, for them, it was a long kind of slog through all the different tech pieces that they knew that they needed, and as they were going to scale, which I really respected. And then, as we got on, like, just got along really well with the team, talking through like co-marketing and PR and all the things that we could do around subnets. it just felt like a perfect fit.
And we've seen a number of gaming products or projects join the Avalanche ecosystem in recent months. I think the biggest ones are Krabata and DeFi Kingdoms, who are also coming. And so we're super excited to not just be launching one game, but bringing in a whole ecosystem. So I guess if there's any new game developers who are thinking about bringing their game to Avalanche, what should they do, or what's the process look like for kind of forming that partnership and determining where to launch?
Yeah, I think that's reaching out to us through, Telegram or Discord or email. But really kind of the way we're envisioning things here is, I like to think of it as like the Netflix of GameFi. So I want us to be a place where, no matter what you're looking to do, so whether it's a quick casual game or an idle game, you're chasing yield, or you want to jump in and just go all in on a first person shooter and play extraction mode and shrapnel and everything in between. We want something for everybody. And so that's kind of how we think about it, where, we're moving into more like away from this play to earn mechanic into what we call play and earn, right? Where it's a core fun to play game with upside, with your NFTs or with tokens. And, I tell people, I know that all the hundreds of hours I put into my Web 2 games and money, if I just had some upside, it probably would have let me play a little bit more, and maybe my parents would have been more open to that. And so, we're kind of unlocking that paradigm, if you will. And it sounds like the Shrapnel team is thinking about that as well.
Yeah, we use the term play to own internally. We think that's the next evolution, especially when you start looking at like creator tools and discovery systems. It all ties together for kind of what we think is the future of that attraction.
Yeah. So go for it, Tony.
Go ahead. I was just saying my personal thesis, I think just where I saw gaming going for a while was just kind of like World of Warcraft and like RuneScape, where you have all these like gray markets kind of popping up around all of the like in-game items and like just trading those. And I mean, I think a lot of people focus on they're like, crypto gaming is so full of grifters, everything it's all just a scam. I think there's real utility here where there clearly are real world valuable assets in game that people would like to trade. And just even facilitating that, I think, is something that would provide a really convenient way for people to do things a lot more safer, than they can already. Because I think, trading passwords for World of Warcraft accounts is pretty sketchy.
Yeah.
All things considered.
Yeah. I mean, you have no idea what you're getting or what you're doing unless there's some sort of reputable line. And it's certainly you using WoW as the example. It's not designed. It's designed to purposefully disable that sort of functionality.
Yeah.
So like all those gray markets where in this space, it's more the free floating approach, and there's certainly the amount of diligence that you have to put ahead of time as a result on the design of an economy, and that's going to be free floating, where people have custody of things. It's non-trivial. It's a lot of effort, right? We have been going through that for a long time, and but I think the upside and the future of it is exactly where it's at.
So you said something really interesting. You said you internally call it play to own. So could you just explain, like, what does that mean to you?
Well, we see it as, whether we're talking about token or the like the fungible token or non-fungible tokens, whatever that is, they represent some notion of ownership. They represent all the utility they provide in all of their various forms. So that might be governance, that might be kind of like social reputation, and it might just be items that you can use in various ways and trade with other people. So effectively, as you're going through and spending your time in a product like Shrapnel, you should be not necessarily rewarded, but your participation should be reflected in a way that it is akin to like how much time you're spending and how much effort you're spending and putting into it. So it's not just that's kind of how we think of that production cycle and what people get out of it and what they want to put back in. And so like when they get into that space of being incentivized in the right ways, and it all starts to kind of align with people who have more of a stake in a project and a company, and then they become a healthy participant, and they should have all of the utility that should be afforded to them as a result.
Yeah, so my intuition around gaming is that it is potentially the killer app for crypto. You know, there's always like this idea of a killer app. You have a platform, and then there needs to be a killer app to really set it off. And for years, people were like, "Oh, the killer app of crypto is money," and that it is a definitely a killer app, but it doesn't seem to be the one that is absolutely taking over. For now, we seem DeFi seems to be the killer app. But my intuition is just that gaming is so perfect. It seems like there's multiple wins here. I think starting at the beginning, and I don't know how this plays into your project, but these are just some of my thoughts. Is that payment rails? So I worked. Connor gets all the credit. I was like a gopher for him, but I was on Connor's team building out an NFT marketplace, which he can dive into if he wants to, and just dealing with traditional payment rails was just it blew my mind. Like I already knew payment rails were bad and that crypto was much better, but boy,
Yeah.
when we started digging in deep, we really understood how bad the traditional payment rails are and how much better crypto is. So it seems to me like just right out of the gate, having different ways to accept payments, do in-app payments, sell your items. It seems like just having new modern payment rails is a huge win. It also seems to me like, imagine I'm playing Super Mario Brothers. Every time I grab a little coin, if that coin had some value, even if it's fractions upon fractions of a penny, just some little bit of value was going to incentivize people in a whole other way. People do this already for just points on the screen. Imagine if those points on the screen had value. Imagine if you could own, your in-game assets, and then you could trade them on an exchange, right? Imagine if you were playing a game, let's say Zelda or something, let's just throw a game out there, and then you beat the boss with one particular item, and then you auctioned off that item for charity, and then a person who's super into that community ultimately acquired that, and then was able to floss that out as they go throughout the game, and with their friends, like, this is the actual app that this is the actual sword that defeated that huge dragon in that big competition. So I think that there's multiple things, from the payment rails to having in-app items be worth something, to then owning those items, to then being able to trade them. And then what I think is like a holy grail here would be even being able to use the different items in other games. And I understand that that is a challenging problem, because how do you not have an item which is super OP in another game, right?
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, so I guess where I'm going, my thoughts here, and I'll pass it back to you, are what are like the hugest bottlenecks? It seems to me that surely regulatory compliance must be a bottleneck, because I have a 13-year-old son, and I'm wondering what are the implications if all of a sudden he's just got a bunch of crypto, in his game. So yeah, I think that would be my question to you, is kind of like, what are the bottlenecks that you see?
Real quick, Gabriel, you're telling me that you're not just funneling crypto down your son's throat every day? He doesn't just have a loaded wallet in his browser? Like, what are you talking about? I thought you were raising him right.
Yeah, he does. He uses LastPass. He's got two-factor on. He's good.
Responsible. I like it. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton, right? I mean, you just named some of the biggest ones, which is certainly the compliance, and I would say custodial, non-custodial pieces of it are something we're very careful with. And I feel like there's some solutions that are getting close to hugging that real hard, and maybe coming up with something unified, but I think it's still going to be a multiple years out. That when you look at, even in traditional like non-crypto business, like the way this has had to play out from an MTL perspective, and just how people can handle things even in the non-crypto space, it's already a huge burden, right? It's already a huge chore. I was saying, like, one of the things that makes Second Life to this day so valuable with like Linden Labs is actually their payment processing, and like the ability of how they can handle funds and handle tax resolutions at the end and everything, right? So that is a deal. That's a big deal. We are not trying to solve all those problems ourselves as Shrapnel. We're finding the partnerships that we think are the best in class in that space right now. We know what we do well, which is creating awesome games and worlds that people want to be in, and making things fun. And ultimately, if like your game's not fun, then you're going to either not last long or attract the wrong type of people. So I think that is a big bottleneck. I think we are partnering with the right people on that front towards solving that. And how do we? You talk about your 13-year-old son. How do you enable that sort of behavior? Because certainly, like, you want those people in your ecosystem. You want them playing the game. What happens when they are playing the game in the same sessions, and how do you handle assets and custody, as well as if those, if when he turns 18 and he wants to convert to like a full KYC'd like crypto account, what does that user experience look like, and how do we enable it? Like, we are definitely hitting all of those attack vectors head on, and I mean, we have an entire team dedicated. We have like 6 orgs, basically organizations that are part of the studio. We have an entire organization that is dedicated to like they are the experience organization that is all the things you're talking about, and keeping it kind of like unified across our web, our web front in the games and apps and everything, so that it's not just taking into account all those like personas that those of us who are trying to solve individual problems aren't going to necessarily think about on a day-to-day basis, but also keeping it coherent and like on brand and with a language that you're going to be familiar with, moving from one touch point to another. Trying to think of what number 2. Certainly like tax reconciliation, again, like with the right partners. On the wallet side, like it's being able to have custodial wallets that interact in the right way and have kind of KYC thresholds that make it so you can play for a while without ever having to worry about that, because we want you to get in the same way you're familiar with any other game and just play with an account, and we'll handle all that until you get to a certain point. And then, I mean, there's the whole just like the blockchain represents an amazing proposition, like technical foundation and proposition for doing the specific things that it does right now, and certainly we're going to see like more interesting expressions on top of that, but is how we make sure we're pushing the bar, but still like delivering fun game and not taking on like too much risk, doing it in the right way where it's represented in the right way within our product, so that we are the best and responsible version of a game out there. We always see, I mean, we spoke before about the gamer audience at large are not huge fans, or at least the maybe noisy minority, in certain social media, are not big fans of blockchain.
Yeah,
Who
for
knows
sure.
what that actual number is? We see our like job and responsibility as pulling people with a like shining example into the direction they need to go. So that is definitely something that weighs on my mind heavily, keeps me up at night, sort of deal. So yeah, I think those are the big chunkies.
On that note, I'm curious, what has the reception been like for you since the announcement? Because you have a lot of different groups that I think you interact with. Like, I think the Avalanche community, from what I've seen, has been overwhelmingly positive. So have you seen that same response from the gaming community? What are your peers, who work at other game companies, think? Are they like, you're crazy, why are you going into blockchain stuff? Or they're just like, oh, cool, we're interested in see how this goes?
I would say it's been overwhelmingly more curious and positive than most of social media would lead you to believe, or certainly the media outlets, main gaming media outlets, would lead you to believe. We have GDC coming up next week, so I'll get an even better feel. But certainly at a conference like DICE, where it's very kind of leadership and business centric, it was intense curiosity. And I would say from a timing perspective, you always think you're late to the game, right? And a lot of times you're too early. But I do honestly feel like for a project like Shrapnel, we are right on time based on the types of questions we're getting and that level of curiosity. People still, even people who are big business decision makers only kind of get it at this point. It does move very fast, so like I get it. It's what we do as a full-time job every day. I don't expect people who have like other styles of publishing and portfolio to necessarily have paid attention, other than it's a thing somebody else is thinking about that they should probably at some point. But I would say there's some noisy people who have all of the same complaints that you see everywhere else. And they are the people that we think a product like ours will like eventually convince, just based on the quality and people's excitement and what that represents. But overwhelmingly positive, to be honest.
What do you think the top three complaints that you hear coming from traditional gaming industry professionals, and how might we address those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's one that's environmental impact, which always comes up, which certainly ignores, chains like Avalanche that hit that head on. It also, I think, ignores just the actual like costs of doing things with centralized processes anyway. And I think it trivializes a lot of things that are not automated in those spaces. And that math can be done by smarter people than me, but I would say it's probably not as egregious as people think, but it's definitely a hot talking point. And it's, technology like Avalanche are making that just be a non-conversation point anyway. I would say the biggest one I hear is like, because we can talk about interoperability too, because that's one that we hold very dear at Shrapnel. Like, transportability and interoperability. We always use the moniker like, we're not the metaverse, we're part of it. So when we build our platform, we build our really like the items and the way creator flows work. We think about you as owning it and what that means somewhere else, and have put a lot of thought into what interop contracts would look like. But what I hear from game devs is very much like, to make that work in my game, I would have to do like X, Y, and Z work. Like, why would I do that? I don't get anything from it, right? And there's a lot of, I think that's a lot of comes from a classic, zero sum competitive landscape that game developers are used to. And there's a couple. It's a scary world to think about what that might mean. And there's a couple like easy responses. One is, you get to decide, right? It's not just going to work in somebody else's platform or somebody else's game. They have to decide how it works and what that means, right? So yes, there is work that needs to be done, but the network value, like I think people in zero sum and like traditional competitive landscape spaces don't understand network value. People like companies like Zynga were probably the pioneers in the space, right? Poker, they had the poker and they have Farmville, and they know that with these like networks of players who might not even know they want to play something like Farmville, they can they're like, I got my like Zynga bucks and I can go take that somewhere else, and now I'm interested in this because I have this just like seamless flow of deciding what I want to do, and I'm going to decide to do that, and I like it because I have this basically the beginnings of interoperability from an account perspective. And certainly we see that with like the publishers of Uplay and Ubisoft having their Ubucks or whatever they're called, and trying to have that sort of translation, but it's all under this one umbrella. But there is a huge thing there when you think about a game like Shrapnel and then something else where we having cross support right now. Somebody from Shrapnel can take their thing and use it somewhere else. They're more likely to go there, right? You have it's an acquisition and retention play for sure. You have a larger community and network effect of the people who are just going to be all part of that same network. The other part is, especially with the kind of interop contracts that we're working on now, your game doesn't have to do that for free either, right? You could say, if you want, that's cool, you've got the Sword of Awesome +2. If you want to use it in my game, there's some sort of transaction fee or some sort of premium towards that. You can totally do that. The point is, you get to decide. This is another option as a game developer, as a platform owner, that you get to actually take advantage of. Yeah, of course, there's work involved, right? Like, to make cool stuff, there's always work involved, but I think it's more than worth it. And I think once the snowball starts to gain momentum and head down the hill, if you're not attached to that ball, it's going to be really hard to compete with it.
And I think one of the biggest criticisms I see is that this is just another form of extraction of, this is the next loot boxes. This is just another way to take your money and do some kind of gambling or whatever. And I think this is just, we don't have any positive examples yet. You know, the only stories that really make it to the mainstream are, this person lost $10 million of crypto because he lost his hard drive or whatever. It's just like, or this, there was this big theft. And so all these people, they hear these negative stories and they don't really have any positive archetypes for something that is really adding lots of value. Like, so few people, honestly, in the mainstream community even know about like Axie Infinity, which is, you know, the biggest game by far right now in crypto. So I think if we have positive archetypes of people who are doing things like play to own, where it's not necessarily about value extraction as it is player empowerment, and allowing them to be rewarded for their contributions to the community and putting time into a game. I think that having positive examples of that will really start to change people's mind. But Ed, I wanted to ask you, what are the trepidations that you're hearing from the developers and the studios that you're talking to? And, you know, how do you, if somebody comes to you and is curious, I guess, how are you convincing them to think about making the jump?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it depends on who you talk to, right? I think there are a lot of Web 2 publishers who, you know, you just search, different CEOs have talked on executive calls, or, you know, companies have hired VPs of blockchain. It's hard because I think to build a really truly meaningful game that's play and earned or play to own, where it's actually fun and has value and kind of hits this flywheel that crypto offers, you kind of got to jump in the deep end, right? You can't just throw a few items on the blockchain and be like, hey, we're the first publisher out to do that. You're going to get roasted. And the moment that there's backlash, you're going to pull back because you're going to say, whoa, crap, like, I don't need this right now, right? So I think you do need at its core someone who really believes in it and is maybe a little crazy enough to be like, no, this is the future, right? Totally get it. You know, certain publishers have certain IP that there are certain rights around, or they can't, let's call it, slay their cash cow and throw it all on the blockchain. But it does require kind of meaningful thought from the ground up to say, hey, what does this economy look like in 4 years? Is it sustainable at different user tiers, right? It's, you know, which blockchain do we need to build on? Who do we need to hire for this? Like, what do items look like? How do you evolve live services? How do you bring in content creators? Like, all those things take time. So, you know, at least the things that we've talked to publishers about, the ones that we're most excited about are the ones that do take time, because there's so much you got to consider. And to your point, you know, the most popular games today are more like idle games or games that are focused on yield. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a game in itself. But when we look at these core fun to play games where you're trying to attract from this, you know, this pool of 2.7 billion Web 2 gamers, you're going to have to come in strong with your offering and really think about all the bells and whistles, if you will.
It's also crazy to me that the most popular game or whatever has like a multi-$1,000 entry point. If you want to play Axie Infinity, if you've never played before, you have to own like 3. It's kind of, Axies are like Pokemon or whatever. They're collectible monsters, and you need, I think, 3 of them to get started. And their floor prices fluctuated. I'm not sure what it is today, but the last time I checked, it was like $600 or $700 per. So you'd have to put in like $2,000 to start playing the game. So it's not like your standard retail $60, $70 game where you just hop in, you pay a small fee, not an outrageous fee. And you're just playing to play. And if you don't make any money, it doesn't matter because you're paying for your enjoyment anyway. With these kind of play to earn games are very much vectors to invest as much as it is to play.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think the floor of Axie is probably, you know, I think a team you can probably get for a few $100s now, but Crabata, which is, you know, one of the biggest games on Avalanche, I think the floor of that is probably low 4 figures per crab, and you need 3 of them. And so, you know, one thing that I've seen that's pretty exciting is the kind of the rise of free to play in Web3 games, because you're right, like while NFT appreciation is always a good story, like that could easily be a bug as much as it is a feature of the game, right? In terms of like limiting the bottleneck there. So yeah, we're seeing some really innovative, like free to play mechanisms or play to mint type things that that can keep that funnel pretty wide. I'll defer to Don on kind of what he's saying and how they're thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think the last time I looked at Krabata was actually like 100 or something to get in. Who knows what the prices are now? And yeah, like you say, Axie is certainly tapered off. It's in a classic human way, right? Using Axie as an example, because it kind of set the pioneer of what the guilds and scholarship programs would be around it, which is, hey, you can't afford to get into this game or don't want to. We'll give you a way that you can play where we basically are leasing these Axie to you, and then there's a cut of the actual play to earn that's going back to the people who actually own the Axies. So it's I imagine if that team had anticipated that, they probably would have systematized that in the protocol itself. So I think you'll certainly see that style of evolution. And it's a classic, like, guilds just represent human behavior and how it approaches a specific set of constraints and how the protocol works, right? That's just always going to happen. And it's kind of intrinsic in this free floating nature of these protocols. So you kind of work with them or be, cursed to your future, like at your own regard. So I think making sure that understanding of it's an incremental thing, right? Those examples of those titles, like you said, it's Pokemon effectively. It have to be very simple expressions. They're always going to be when they start, and then there's the next incremental version after it behaves in ways that you couldn't possibly comprehend. Doesn't matter how much of the economics you do, there's always going to be like min max and vectors that you just have no idea about, right? It's the classic, like, economists spend half their time telling you about their like perfect economic model, and then the other half of their time they are explaining why it didn't work. So it's like you never know until it hits human flesh what's actually going to happen. But I love where it's at and the grand experiment of it and the kind of incremental nature from each one of these titles to the next. They're in a very different space, not very different, but certainly have dimensions of them that I think Shrapnel kind of it seeks to create more like production within itself, due to the creator nature of the tools that we have and what those like allow people to do. But at the same time, right, like Axie is a type of game that you can like almost everybody on the planet can play on every grade of mobile device, right? It's like accessibility is enormous for it, other than the monetary side. So again, there's like wildly different audiences that you're kind of appealing to and applying to with those different economic principles.
And I think that's one of the hard parts about game development right now is I think most people know how to build they know what the rules are when you build a first person shooter. And when you build like kind of like, or if you want to build your Fire Emblem kind of like tactical game or whatever, like we know what the paradigm is. There's still ways to reinvent the genre. And like you see people do that, when something like Breath of the Wild comes out that reinvents the open world genre. But we're really kind of entering new territories where there are no rules. And there's no way to just copy a successful project and run it exactly the same way and have like a guaranteed outcome. Like everything is an experiment right now. And so there's a lot of risk because, there's no university who can give you tokenomics 101 that tells you, okay, like this is exactly the right amount of NFTs to have. This is the right amount of variability. All of that stuff is so hard to figure out. A lot of throwing darts blindfolded and just trying to make something that seems good that you can kind of try to vet as much as you can, but ultimately it's kind of a leap of faith.
Well, it's cloud powered, Monte Carlo simulations as well. Yeah. You definitely want to validate all of that as much as you can. You never, like I said, it's never completely shored up. It allows you at least to understand how to get good balance, sustained like healthy growth, and where you can have levers from an economic perspective so that when things do change based on human behavior, you at least can mitigate like negative impact.
So are you developing all of those like simulations and stuff in house, or are you working with like crypto focused firms, or like can you shout anybody out if anybody's interested, or is this all?
Don't know if I can.
Okay, no
yeah,
pressure.
I
I'm just
probably
curious.
can. Yeah, I mean, we'll have some of them in our white paper that we'll be
Mm-hmm.
releasing soon. But I don't know. I don't want to say something and get smacked.
Sure,
Yeah,
no problem. But yeah, definitely better safe than sorry. But that
Yeah.
kind of does lead into.
But
my
yeah,
next...
just tell us the release date real quick while you're figuring
Yeah.
that out. And then we'll,
Yeah, that kind of brings me into my next set of questions is about your team. So how big are you guys today?
We're just internal. We're a little over 30, I think. And then
How long have you been around?
Neon's been around for 2 years. Shrapnel Project's inception, and by inception I mean the hey, like almost just the putting the butter on the bread version of that thing we've been thinking about, like extraction game modding and doing it, with a blockchain from the ground up. What do you think about that? So that was about a year ago.
Okay.
So the team has grown and evolved over time. We come from our founding team all comes from HBO, which is where we all met. We've all been in the AAA game industry in some form or another for, some of us like 20 years or more. The built studios, everything from like building studios to doing global publishing. I think all of us worked at Xbox at some point in various capacities, but like I've been everywhere from like Madden to Star Wars and Indiana Jones to BioShock to all the Crackdown and Sunset Overdrive and Quantum Break stuff at Xbox. But we all came from that HBO kind of transmedia pedigree. So we did stuff with Westworld and with Game of Thrones and whatnot when we were at HBO. And then when AT&T acquired Warner Media, we kind of saw the writing on the wall in terms of their laser focus on HBO Max and all that. And you can certainly see we feel validated in our decision making every day. We can just see the tone and kind of quality change and offering that happens when you get those giant conglomerates, when you've got a like telecom company basically at the top of running media empires. So that was a couple of years ago, and we had a couple of like production publishing working products, and decided to effectively build an internal studio that was centered around Shrapnel. We do come as a result of our history with that like deep publishing background. So when I talk about our internal team, it's largely scaled out. We have like that muscle is a very familiar muscle internally. We all have been in publishing leadership positions, so know how to do it responsibly, right? Every time you do that sort of thing, there's a tax from a team perspective of doing something externally versus internally. But if you know how to manage it, you can get a lot out of it. And to be honest, in the game industry, even like 1 or 2 person indie teams, that's how you do business nowadays, right? You're not going to have a dedicated like audio person on your team on an indie project, a very small indie project. You're going to contract that out, and if you're a test team, you're going to contract that out, and it's like how you do business.
So I wanted to ask about that actually. So how are you approaching like hiring for blockchain expertise? Are you trying to teach existing game devs how to use blockchain, or have them figure it out? Or are you hiring dedicated blockchain people who know maybe less about games?
No. So we have constant education internally about just like decentralized engineering, but that's not with the expectation that is people's primary responsibility. When we first started, again going back to that year part with Shrapnel. So I'm also the CTO for Neon, which is our like company. So I was the guy who was like, I'm gonna go write some smart contracts and get into this, and I have to like get my hands on it and start doing things from a technical perspective. And that was enough to not just be able to speak competently about it, but to know that I wouldn't trust anybody who hadn't been doing it for like 4 or 5 years. So we're not going to like train up people internally to run that side of the house. We are hiring people who have been doing it for 4 or 5 years, as well as, like I said, engaging with development partners kind of around the world that are expertise in blockchain development.
There's a number of people who have been doing it for 4 or 5 years is very small.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Trust me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our blockchain director was worked at GE. I think when he started doing his first blockchain stuff, that was like early Hyperledger work that was very much in the like just distributed ledger accounting application of it, right? Like super early days. So he's about as old as the people, like has been doing it as long as most of the people I've been talking to.
And what type of positions and roles are you trying to land right now?
I mean, we're always looking to flesh out our game team more and more, right? We have a large, like almost an entire leadership team. So, on the game team, that's the kind of stool of art, design, and engineering. So we're always looking for talent in that space, and even if it's not a like particular role that we, because you can't just have like, hey, we need 40 roles, even though we might at some point. We always are looking for opportunistic people who might not be the perfect fit, but could be like trained or coached into that position because they have the right spirit and chops for it. So we're all like still on all 3 of those tripods. We're definitely looking, as well as production staff, like producers in game world are extremely important. It's same as film world. When you get into the entertainment space, it is a there's a lot of producers. There are not that many good ones. And I know I'm probably gonna get like lambasted and like flamed for this, but it's true. It is that thing that seems organizational, but to actually like deliver and execute on that front with a creative team who are all over the place sometimes, and actually deliver something at quality is extremely difficult. So, I spoke about the like 3 parts to that stool, but like I can't ignore production in all of it effectively. We are what else are we looking for right now? We're plussing up our Marcom team, like certainly in this space. And we are going to come out hot and heavy in the starting in the next few weeks, and just constantly from now moving forward in terms of community engagement. That'll be all sorts of stuff that we'll be dropping for the community, incentivizing them to get involved. We've been with our Discord and the like already building that community, getting feedback, like rewarding people for their efforts. So that's just gonna have like a steady climb. And that once we get to that scale, that's gonna happen in the near future, we're gonna need more people in that space. So we're definitely scaling out that part of our team.
So Ed, I guess, Avalanche is a permissionless platform. Nobody has to have Avalab's permission to launch their game here, but a lot of people come and talk to Avalanche, or sorry, our Avalabs to try to get some help to launch their product. So other than money, I'm curious, what are the asks that people have when they come to the platform? Are they like asking for assistance, like finding blockchain engineers, or like, what are, I guess, their biggest questions? So if there's any aspiring entrepreneurs who want to build out companies to service game devs, like, I guess, what are you hearing are the biggest missing links that people need help with?
Yeah, I think, look, in all of these areas, we can always do better, and we're always striving to. But what I would say is the recruiting one is always a big one. We do our best to try to intro to folks. We've got kind of a Discord group and the Trader Joe guys have set up, but there isn't kind of a tried and true thing. And I think everyone's trying to figure that out. So, that's probably a muscle that we can flex. But what I would say, other areas that we really go deep with our games on are, number one, kind of going back to the whole technical support, right? We've worked with some teams like, the Shrapnel team, who they kind of like, they've shopped around everywhere. They know exactly what they want. And they were like, you guys are the one, we're going to just go start building. And then we've worked with folks that, are deploying their first smart contract, and like, we'll work very closely with them, and then everything in between. So that is first and foremost. I've heard even before I joined here that like the Avalanche team does a really good job of partnering on the engineering side. And then I got the co-marketing piece where, we do Twitter Spaces and we do, PR and comms. And we've got the summit coming up and, other types of talks and panels that we go on with our games, like this one as well. And then like the ecosystem. Like I like to tell people that in terms of like 360 degrees, I don't think there's a better ecosystem in crypto, just because we've got like some of the top launch pads, we've got fair launch platforms, we've got arguably the top decks in all of crypto, and then we've got guilds and DAOs and investors, and just like the momentum and the excitement around what we're doing is extremely noticeable. And then of course we've got the financial piece with things like the Blizzard Fund, and we've got the Multiverse incentive program and whatnot. So I think end to end we do a really good job of, we call it Avalanche as a service, right? Like it's not just about the tech piece, not just about the money, it's about everything that you need to successfully launch.
Yeah, I would second that that idea that this is the best ecosystem or community in the crypto ecosystem. I myself have been in the blockchain space for many, many years, and I've seen lots of different projects come and go. And there's no question about it. From where I'm sitting, Avalanche, like I said, I compared it to Web 2.0 earlier. I really do believe that there's something special going on with Avalanche, and you can feel it just in the community. I wonder if we might briefly touch on. You mentioned Multiverse, which is something we recently launched, and it's like an incentivization fund for getting subnets. Is there a large part of that is specifically focused on gaming? How much, where's the overlap between Multiverse and gaming as you see it, Ed?
Yeah, I think the great thing about Multiverse is it's for any DApp or any team that's building on a subnet. So, I think there are a lot of different use cases, and we'll hear a lot more, I'm sure, next week and in the time to come. But gaming makes a lot of sense for a lot of these reasons. You talk about with a publisher where they can have their own token, so the Shrap token as your gas token instead of a Vox, right? And you can set gas rules, and with a lot of these tokens where they have a combination of governance and inflationary tokens, it's a really cool way to kind of have a burn mechanism where maybe a certain chunk of that gets burned, a certain chunk of it goes to validators. So the possibilities are endless there. And then, you talked about gaming being the perfect use case for subnets. I think we all agree here. And so these games, to get to where they're envisioning, need to scale really quickly. And so being able to support that. So I think there's a top level fund. The first fund or the first recipient we've announced is a game. And I'm sure that anybody launching on a subnet would be a candidate for that Shrapnel as well.
Excellent. It has been right at an hour, and we always are very respectful of people's time. So I think we can start leading it towards wrapping it up. I think we'll probably just pass the mic around one more time to make sure that everybody, if there's anything left that we want to cover. So let's start with you, Don. Again, thank you so much. Really, we're incredibly grateful for your time. You have an open invitation if you ever want to come back. If you want to plug something on Shrapnel or whatever, just let us know, and you can jump back on the mic. But I'll pass the mic to you. Any last minute thoughts?
I mean, thank you for having me, and I'm sure we'll definitely be talking a lot more in the near future and mid future. Yeah, I mean, I would just urge anybody out there who's more curious to come find us online at shrapnel.com. We've got a fairly active Discord that's growing more and more by the day, or find us on Twitter at PlayShrapnel. Yeah, where I hopefully got a good idea of what we're about. But if you want to interact more, ask any questions, our dev team's in there, and please go to town.
Would you like to share your social channels if people want to connect with you?
Yeah. Yes, it's Twitter is PlayShrapnel.
Do you have a personal?
Mine personal is Don Norbury on Twitter.
Yep.
Yeah,
gotta have all the plugs, man. 501 followers. You can do better than that.
I know. Yeah, that's a good point.
Everybody go follow him right now.
Hey, no follower shaming here, okay?
Yeah, help come on, help a dev out.
Okay, so thank you very much. Ed, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's going to be the year of GameFi here, amongst many things. That is very anatomically accurate, by the way, that NFT that I have there. But no, we're thrilled to be partnering with Shrapnel. We are big fans of the team, if you couldn't tell. Next week at Summit, we've got a lot of game reveals, and Calvin from the Shrapnel team will actually be sharing more on stage, and that's all going to be live streamed. So my Twitter is at EDC, and yeah, looking forward to chatting more with people.
Yeah, awesome. And great Twitter handle, by the way. My God, dude, score.
I know.
That's what I was thinking too. I'm like 2009, he still got a 3-character one. Damn.
Yeah, for real. Okay, and then last but certainly not least, Connor, thoughts?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for joining us. This has been really exciting. This is going to be going live on Monday, the day before Avalanche Summit kicks off. So it sounds like we'll be hearing a lot more from Shrapnel in the near future, and I, for one, am super stoked. So yeah, pleasure to meet you this time. Ed, can't wait to hang out with you in a few days.
Likewise.
Awesome.
And yeah, you can find me on Twitter. So I might follower shame, Don a little bit, but feel free to follow me, boost my numbers, help my self-esteem. So I'm DAS_Connor, DAS_CONNOR.
All right. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. You can follow me on Twitter, CG Cardona, CGCARDONA. And as always, if you've made it this far, you are an absolute champion, and we're incredibly grateful. We've just been having a ton of positive feedback from the community around the Subnet show. And so, I want to express gratitude, of course. And then we've got just a bunch of great guests lined up. 2022 is absolutely the year of the Subnet. And so it's also the year of the Subnet show. So if you're in Barcelona, by the time this is going live, we'll all be out in Spain. So come find us. Myself, I'll be there giving a presentation, Connor as well. And we're doing a live episode of the Subnet show. So come and find us. If Barcelona is anything like Lisbon, and I suspect it's going to be way better, this is going to be an absolutely amazing event. So I'm incredibly excited. If you see me, please come and connect with me. That's why I'm going. I want to connect with everybody possible. So if you see me, come and say hi. So we will be back next week at the same time on the same channel. And so as always, from Snowflake to Avalanche and through consensus to the stars. Thank you, everybody. See you next week.